The tennis world was left in absolute shock and disbelief yesterday, not because of a stunning upset, but because of what happened after the final point. Aryna Sabalenka, the powerhouse known for her thunderous ground strokes and warrior-like mentality, didn't just lose a match. She lost her composure in a way we have never seen before. In a moment that was supposed to be about the rise of a new star, Alex Eala, the spotlight was stolen by a breakdown so raw and so public that it left the crowd gasping. The cameras captured a whispered conversation, and the aftermath has ignited a firestorm of controversy. Now, the internet is ablaze, and the fans are turning against one of the game's most beloved figures, demanding answers for a crime no one saw coming. The air on the court was electric, thick with the humidity of a hard-fought battle. Alex Eala, the young prodigy from the Philippines, had just pulled off the biggest victory of her career, a monumental upset that sent a seismic shock through the tennis establishment. As the crowd erupted in a standing ovation, the camera zoomed in on the two athletes approaching the net for the obligatory handshake. It was a tradition, a simple gesture of sportsmanship to cap off a grueling contest. What followed, however, was anything but traditional. The cameras, hungry for the emotional exchange between a seasoned veteran and a rising star, caught a snippet of a conversation that would become the most talked-about moment of the tournament. Sabalenka, her face a mask of exhaustion and bitterness, leaned in toward Eala. Her lips moved, forming words that were inaudible to the millions watching at home, but whose impact was instantly visible. Eala's expression, which had been one of pure, unadulterated joy, flickered for a split second with something akin to surprise or concern. It was a fleeting moment, a micro-expression that would be analyzed and reanalyzed by pundits and fans alike. But it was Sabalenka's reaction that truly defined the scene. She didn't just nod and walk away, as is the custom. Instead, she lingered, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of the world had been placed upon them. The vibrant, aggressive energy she was known for seemed to drain from her body in that single instant, replaced by a hollow shell of the player who had dominated the tour for years. As she turned to face her opponent one last time, her eyes glistened, betraying a level of emotional turmoil that was completely uncharacteristic. The winner's celebration was underway on the other side of the net, but all eyes were glued to Sabalenka, who was slowly crumbling before the world's eyes, a storm brewing behind her tear-filled gaze. She walked back to her chair, her steps heavy, the sound of the crowd's applause now a distant hum compared to the chaos unfolding inside her head. The silence that fell over the stadium was deafening, a stark contrast to the raucous celebration that had just begun for Alex Eala. Aryna Sabalenka, a player who had built her career on a foundation of unshakable mental fortitude, was breaking down in the most public of forums. As she sat in her chair, her body began to tremble, and the first tears began to fall, cutting a path through the dirt and sweat on her cheeks. This was not the stoic defeat of a player who had given her all. This was a visceral, gut-wrenching sob that seemed to come from somewhere deep within her soul. She buried her face in a towel, trying to hide from the merciless glare of the cameras, but it was too late. The image was burned into the collective memory of millions. The mighty have fallen, and they are weeping. Her coach rushed to her side, his attempts at consolation appearing feeble and ineffective against the tidal wave of emotion that was consuming her. The crowd, which had initially been full of admiration for Eala's victory, began to shift their focus. The initial shock turned into confusion, then into a palpable sense of unease. Whispers began to ripple through the stands. What did she say? Is she injured? Why is she crying? No one had an answer. As Sabalenka finally rose to leave the court, the raw display of vulnerability had touched some, while making others deeply uncomfortable. The narrative of the match had completely flipped. It was no longer about the brilliance of Alex Eala. It was about the incomprehensible, devastating meltdown of a former champion. This wasn't just losing, this was something else, something darker and far more complicated. The fans, who were usually quick to offer sympathy to a defeated player, were silent, unsure of how to react to the distressing scene playing out before them. The tennis world is accustomed to competitive fire, but this was a display of fragility so stark that it left a lingering, bitter taste in the mouths of those who witnessed it. The image of her tear-stained face was a stark reminder that behind the titles and trophies, there is a human being capable of immense pain. as the realization sank in that what they had just witnessed was not a moment of disappointment but a profound psychological collapse. The sentiment of the crowd began to curdle. The initial concern and pity for Sabalenka quickly morphed into a wave of resentment and confusion. The whispering grew into loud murmurs, and then, unmistakably, came the first few sounds of discontent, a smattering of boos. It was a shocking turn of events, as the crowd that had just been celebrating a magnificent victory was now directing their anger at the defeated player. But why? The answer lay in the collective confusion. The fans had come to see a battle of tennis, not a psychodrama. Sabalenka's breakdown was so extreme that it seemed to overshadow and almost belittle the immense achievement of her opponent. Many spectators felt that her reaction was a form of disrespect to Eala, a theft of the young player's moment in the sun. The sentiment online was even more brutal. Social media platforms were flooded with accusations. "She's a sore loser," one tweet read. "She should be congratulating Eala, not making it all about herself," another commented. The narrative was no longer about a struggling champion. It was about a narcissist who couldn't handle being defeated. The very traits that had made Sabalenka a fan favorite, her intensity, her ferocity, were now being weaponized against her, seen as evidence of a toxic, self-centered personality. "What did she say to Alex?" became a trending question, but the speculation was far from benign. Many theorized that she had made a spiteful or cruel comment to her younger opponent, which was the only way to justify her subsequent breakdown. The internet court had no jury and no judge. It had already reached a verdict of guilty. Sabalenka, the warrior, was now being portrayed as the villain of the piece, her emotional vulnerability twisted into a narrative of unsportsmanlike conduct and petty jealousy. In the eye of the storm stood Alex Eala, the young victor whose fairy tale win was being eclipsed by a tabloid-level controversy. While the world was dissecting Sabalenka's every tear and expression, Eala's reaction to the whispered words became a focal point of intense scrutiny. During the handshake, she had appeared momentarily taken aback, but she quickly recovered her poise, offering a gentle pat on her opponent's back before turning to celebrate with her team. In the post-match press conference, Eala was a picture of diplomatic grace, but the media was relentless. They hounded her with questions about the exchange. "What did she say to you?" they demanded. Were her words appropriate? Eala, however, remained tight-lipped, offering only platitudes about respecting her opponent and the spirit of the game. She refused to confirm or deny any of the wild speculations flooding the internet. This carefully crafted silence, however, only fueled the fire. If the comment was harmless, why not just repeat it? The ambiguity led to a frenzy of interpretations, most of which favored the narrative that Sabalenka had crossed a line. Some fans began to interpret Eala's silence as a sign of profound hurt, believing she was taking the high road by not airing her opponent's dirty laundry. This positioned the young player as the ultimate victim, a pure and innocent soul who was subjected to a veteran's cruelty. But others started to question if Eala's silence was a strategic move, a calculated act to keep the attention on herself and her victory, using the controversy to elevate her status. The drama had created a fascinating dynamic, a veteran champion hemorrhaging support and a young star ascending to the throne under a cloud of ambiguity, with the real story of that whispered conversation remaining the most tantalizing, unsolved mystery of the tennis season. As the dust begins to settle on this dramatic turn of events, the long-term implications for Aryna Sabalenka are beginning to crystallize, and they are daunting. This single moment of weakness threatens to undo years of hard work building her brand and reputation. The Sabalenka meltdown will now be an indelible part of her legacy, a clip that will be replayed for decades to come, not for the brilliance of her play, but for her public unraveling. The sponsorship implications are severe. Companies are wary of associating with controversy, and a star whose fan base is turning against her is a precarious investment. Her mental fortitude, once her greatest asset, is now a subject of widespread doubt. Every future loss will be interpreted through this lens, every frown on her face analyzed for signs of another imminent collapse. To repair the damage, a strategic and genuine campaign to rebuild her image is in order. This isn't just about issuing a statement. It's about a fundamental shift in her public persona. She needs to directly address the situation with transparency and vulnerability, perhaps explaining the pressures that led to her breakdown without making excuses. Most crucially, She needs to engage with Alex Eala and the public, not to offer a token apology, but to demonstrate genuine support for the rising star's success. Her path back to grace requires humility, a commodity she has rarely displayed on the court. The fans who booed her are not her enemies, they are a barometer of her own actions. To win them back, she must show them a side of herself that is not just a fierce competitor, but also a resilient and gracious human being. The tennis world is watching, and the clock is ticking on the redemption arc of Aryna Sabalenka. If you enjoyed this latest tennis update and want to stay ahead of the biggest stories in the world, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe the channel right now. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of the action. See you in the next video.